this video, I would like to talk about buying a bass. Now, I'll try to keep this short and concise, but this is such a big subject that it's really kind of hard to do that, but I'll do my best and give you some tips and pointers that maybe you can think about next time you're in search of an instrument. The first thing is budget. How much money do you have to spend? Now, that varies greatly because with all the great luthiers and the handmade basses now, the sky's the limit. And we're just talking about electric basses. We're not even talking about double bass world because that's off the charts. So that's going to determine a lot, is your budget. The second thing is playability. When you first get an instrument and you play the instrument, how does it feel? What is just the general feeling that you get from the interaction with the instrument? But there's something very important to keep in mind. If the instrument's been sitting in the store a while and it's the climate of the room is hot and cold, or you live in a part of the world or country where the climate changes a lot, that can have a great impact on the neck moving, and it can have a great impact on the action of the strings raising and lowering, and it can also whack out the intonation where you can never keep it in tune. Those are all minute problems with a really good luthier. Very easy to fix those things, okay? So you almost have to look past those things and just generally, how does the instrument play to you, the playability factor. The third thing is construction. So there's a lot of different variables here, okay? But the main thing for me is the neck. That's the first thing I think about. This bass, made by Mike Padula, this is a fretless MVP custom, and maybe I'll do a video in the future kind of detail on the bass more. But generally, just right now, what I wanted to show you was this is a neck through. So what does that mean? That means this is all one piece of wood. There's no bolt-on neck here, okay? The upside to having a neck through, in my opinion, is the sustain factor is greater. I mean, the sustain on a neck through typically is amazing. And the downside is this is going to cost you more. And the other downside is to a neck through is if you hurt your neck, you're in big trouble because you can't just you're dealing with the whole instrument at that point. A bolt-on neck is going to be a little cheaper in price, they sound amazing. There's no denying it. But if something were to happen to your neck, it's very easy to have that replaced, and the whole instrument isn't a wash. So that's a very big thing to consider as well. The fourth point I would like to make is the cutaway, all right? I'm calling this the cutaway right here. Now, I love the way the Padula has got this out because I'm able to reach all these notes from the very first fret all the way to the highest fret. Now, there's some bass makers and that the way the cutaway is here, you can't even reach the notes up here. And for me, it just seems stupid and pointless. And I understand it because a lot of that comes from the acoustic guitar. If you've ever picked up acoustic guitar, it's very rare that you can ever get to those high notes. But if I'm going to spend money for an instrument and it's got all the notes on the instrument, I want to be able to play those notes if I choose to without freaking out my hand technique. So that's something to consider, is the cutaway here. Another thing to consider is the weight. How heavy is the instrument? Especially, when you put it on. And forget about the strap right now, okay? You can find straps that are a little more comfortable. I'm just talking just generally, how heavy is the instrument? Because believe me, if you're doing a long rehearsal or a long day in the studio, or you have an 1.5-hour show or a 4-hour set somewhere, and you're wearing a 25-pound instrument, I promise you, even if you're 18 years old, over time, that's going to take a big toll on your neck and on your back, and it's a very important factor. So to me, another thing I love about the Padula, it is really actually light, especially for a 5-string instrument. So consider the weight, okay? Brings me to the other point, is how many strings are we talking about? Typically, most basses are 4 strings, right? But now there's 5 and 6 and beyond that. So that's going to increase your budget, but it's also going to increase some creativity and some things that you couldn't do on a 4-string. That said, I think it is important at some point in your instrument collection, so to speak, that you have a 4-string. And there's a lot of guys I know that if you show up with anything more than a 4-string, they get a little scared because they think you're like a guitar wannabe player as opposed to just being a bass player. So you have to make sure that when you buy an instrument that's got more than 4 strings, that you really learn the role of the bass and that you don't get caught up in all the cool stuff that the extra strings can allow you to do. I think that's something to keep in mind, okay? The active electronics. Okay, what does that mean? What is active and what is passive? Well, typically having an active instrument means that you have a 9-volt battery. So I have a 9-volt battery in this bass, and I can actively turn it on with the switch here, and if I turn it back here, it goes into passive mode. But having that active 9-volt battery gives it a little more juice, gives it a little more growl, a little more grit. But I've also spent a fortune in batteries over a quality of my lifetime. And I always have to keep 9-volt batteries nearby because if it goes down, not all basses are like that, but this bass is, if the 9-volt battery goes down, I don't get any sound out of the instrument. So to me, that's the only drawback, but I like the way it sounds, so it's fine. Just carry a screwdriver and some extra batteries in my gig bag and I'm cool. The next thing is, we hadn't even really talked about tone or sound, but it's everything, right? And now you've heard, the musicians will sometimes say, oh, that guy, it's all in his hands. I am a big believer in that, right? Especially playing upright. It's like, how could you take a guy, let's just say a guitarist like B.B. King, could play his guitar and then go play any other guitar and it still sounds like B.B. King? That's true. It's very much in your soul and your heart and your presence and in your hands, but it also there's also some variable factors that can affect your tone. And we're just talking about the instrument. We're not even getting into amps or preamps or pedals. This is just strictly a bass on this video, right? So the strings can make a huge difference. The action that you have the strings, typically the bass will sound better if the action's higher, but it's obviously harder to play. So you have to find that balance of getting a good tone and at the same time being able to play the instrument. Other thing we haven't even talked about are the pickups here, right? The pickup height. That's huge for the tone. Even if you roll or dip one of these pickups here into a certain position, that hugely affects. So that's a major thing to consider. And of course, where you're placing your hand on the instrument is going to affect the tone as well. Which brings me to another point about buying a bass, is the pickup style. You hear a lot about PJ and jazz pickups and the combination. I'm not going to go deep into that in this lesson, just maybe we will at some point, but YouTube PJ jazz pickup and you'll see a wealth of information. But basically it's the style of pickups and the way they're configured on the body of the bass. These are Bartolini pickups and I really am a huge fan, and I understand why Mike puts them in these basses. They are awesome and they're very versatile and they get lots of different colors. But it's a very important point that if you find a great instrument that's got a great playability factor, but you're not real sold on the tone, that can change because you can replace the pickups all day long. There's all kinds of incredible pickup makers. You can swap them in and out and monkey around with the positioning of it until you find something that sounds right to what you're feeling, okay? So don't let that detract you from not buying an instrument. Another factor, to me, is probably the least of my worries, is the color of the instrument. Now, I understand we're all visual people. I'm a big visual guy, I think, in terms of visuals, but I'm not so shallow, and I wouldn't buy an instrument because it was like didn't have a nice color to it. To me, that's the least of my worries. If it plays good and it sounds good, feels good, and it's not too heavy, and I can get to all the notes, bring it on. I would take that over worrying about the color. But I know some people are very particular about that, and obviously it definitely can make an impact. So But just one thing to keep in mind on the Kohler. I'm all down about getting freaky and doing the craziest thing to your bass, but you might want to be a little conservative with the colors that you pick, because there might be some playing situations that you might find yourself in that if you pull out a hot pink bass, it might just be off-putting to some people that are hiring you. Just something to think about. Nothing against pink, by the way. Let me see. Cutaway sound pickups, neck construction. Well, I did talk about the string count, but another thing I didn't talk about is the width of the neck. Obviously, if you're using a bolt-on neck, you can find necks that have different width values, right? But this 5-string, most 5 strings have a really wide neck. This is a little skinnier than normal, and Mike designed it that way for me because I like the feel of playing a 5-string, but it almost kind of feels like I'm playing a 4-string because the neck is skinny. That's another thing to consider. I don't know if I've got anything else, but you know, the tuning pegs here, all these little minute things, they are important. Obviously, you got to keep your instrument in tune, but these kind of things can be fixed and they can be taken out and swapped out. Just generally, and the bridge, we haven't talked about the bridge, but I believe that having a very good bridge is really important to keeping the intonation together and keeping your everything kind of in check here, all right? But that's just generally, I guess, what this lesson, I wanted to just point out some things to just kind of consider. Maybe I've missed a few things, but I think I've hit on the things that I kind of wanted to mention. So I hope you found this helpful, and okay.